This time on Unsolved Cases, the death of Tina McMenamin, a 24-year-old cold case that happened on the campus of UNL.
Let's dive right in. Tina McMenamin was stabbed to death on July 25, 1995, in her South Lincoln apartment. Tina was getting ready at 4 o'clock to go to her shift at Godfather's Pizza at 5:30. Between the time of 4:30 to 5:30, Tina was brutally raped, beaten, then stabbed. After the murder, the room was soaked with bleach, destroying most of the evidence. Later that night, it was her roommate, Sarah Bognich, who discovered her body. As Sarah entered the apartment, she said, "The apartment was ransacked. I walked past the bedroom a couple times before noticing her on the floor. My life changed after that."
I think that'd be so weird, to just, not weird, but scary, to just walk in and then finding your best friend dead.
Yeah, especially with everything that he did to her.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the suspects. Gregory Gabel, a 32-year-old mentally ill man at the time, would often work for food at a Sonic nearby. Gabel was also known for being obsessed with bleach, which he had previously used to clean up blood from fights at a nightclub about a month before the murder. He was also overheard telling someone about strangling someone in the library by a librarian.
Bleach? Who's obsessed with bleach, honestly?
I was gonna say that, I was like, bleach? Who's obsessed with... What? I mean, why are you known for bleach?
Yeah.
That's...
How does that start? That's weird.
During the time after the murder, Gable was placed at the crime scene based off location and DNA evidence from a hair clutched in Tina's hand. Police later arrested him a year after the crime. 2 years later, a second DNA test proved that the hair was not Gable's. The lead investigator for the case, Doki, stated, quote, "That hair, however, didn't necessarily belong to the killer," unquote.
There specifically, so
Yeah.
that they wouldn't find it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The investigator also had suspicions about the validity of the second DNA test conducted in the lab. There were questions that came up. Was it the right hair? The same hair? He states. Another suspect, 21-year-old man Daniel Stroll, lived in the same apartments as Tina at the time of her killing. Later that year, he was charged with the death and sexual assault of Pamela S. Kelly on December 21, 1995. He also matched many of the same descriptions as the suspect for McMenamin's killing. Daniel murdered Pamela Kelly in a similar manner to McMenamin's death. He also pleaded guilty to third-degree assault on a child younger than 16, but there was no conclusive evidence to prove he was the killer.
Let's take a look at what we know. The suspect in Tina's slaying was described as an 18 to 22-year-old male with a thin build, weighing between 150 and 170 pounds, and had collar-length blonde hair. The killer had to know Tina's schedule in order to perfectly time her murder and his escape, and the killer used a lot of bleach.
Here are some theories about the case. Theory 1. Tina was murdered by Gregory Gabel, who matched the description of a man seen fleeing the murder scene not long after her death. He had a computer-like memory for numbers, thus it would have been easy for him to plan out his killing schedule perfectly. He also cleaned up the evidence with bleach, which he was obsessed with. He planted a hair in Tina's hand, which was not his own, in an attempt to steer the blame away from himself. This almost proved incriminating, though, because the first DNA test found traces of his DNA on the hair, which could have occurred when he placed it in Tina's hand.
Theory 2. Tina was slayed by Daniel after he broke into her apartment. Tina struggled for her life, but Daniel pinned her down. She was later assaulted, beaten, and stabbed. Daniel grabbed a bottle from his apartment and drenched the place in bleach to clear any evidence. He later went back to his apartment. Whether it was Gregory or Daniel, Tina was a college student who just finished a year at UNL. She was known for being outgoing and charismatic. She was the only child and would later have a scholarship under her name, and a gum tree would be replaced in her memory. Unless we figure out more evidence on this case, it will always remain unsolved.